Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio Network. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And on today's program, lest we forget, with host Lillian Cauldwell, we're going to talk about two states, California and Texas. Today, we're going to address Texas on the understanding that they want to secede from the Union because of immigration. Now, legally, Texas can't legally secede from the U.S., despite what you think. A law was passed after the Civil War that states can't do that, even though they will claim that they were a republic before becoming a state in the country of the United States. Eric McDaniel, an associate professor of government at the University of Texas at Austin, told the Texas Tribune in 2016, and I quote, "The Civil War played a very big role in establishing the power of the federal government and cementing that the federal government has the final say in these issues," unquote. When the Civil War started, states within the United States was torn apart by the question of slavery being expanded into the nation's western territories. It was not about slavery. The only part that was about slavery was when new states were being added and opened in the United States, whether the plantation owners had the right to legally bring those slaves of theirs into these new states and use them as slaves. In 1861, Texas then voted to secede out of the Union. During the Civil War, up to 750,000 people died. In 1865, Texas was formally readmitted to the United States. In 1870, during the Reconstruction era. Many historians believe that after the Confederacy surrendered at Appomattox in 1865, the idea of secession was forever defeated. McDonald said, "The Union's victory set a precedent that states could not legally secede." The U.S. Supreme Court declared that secession had never been legal and that even during the rebellion, which was the war between the states, as the South preferred it to be called, Texas continued to be a state. In 1869, Texas versus White, in a court case, held that individual states could not unilaterally secede from the Union, and that acts of the insurgent Texas legislature, even if ratified by a majority of Texans, were absolutely null. So when Texas entered the Union, she entered into an indissoluble relation. Chief Justice Salmon P. Chase wrote for the court, "All the obligations of perpetual union and all the guarantees of Republican government in the Union attached at once to the state. The act which consummated her admission into the Union was something more than a compact. It was the incorporation of a new member into the political body. and it was final. The union between Texas and the other states was as complete, as perpetual, and as indissoluble as the union between the original states. There was no place for reconsideration or revocation, except through revolution or through consent of the states. And Chase added, the ordinance of secession adopted by the convention and ratified by a majority of the citizens of Texas on all the acts of her legislature intended to give effect to that ordinance were absolutely null. They were utterly without operation in law, unquote. Now, another source of confusion and misinformation over the years was the language in the 1845 annexation resolution that Texas could, in the future, choose to divide itself into, quote, new states of convenient size, not exceeding 4 in number, in addition to said state of Texas, unquote. But the language merely states that Texas could be split into 5 separate states. It said nothing about splitting apart from the United States, and only that Congress had the power to admit new states to the Union, which occurred last in 1959 with the admission of Alaska and Hawaii. So when you read in the paper or on Google that Texas wants to secede, legally, it cannot. And it's been a perennial theme for years. Texas, which originally broke away from Mexico in 1836, was an independent republic before it was annexed by the United States in 1845. In 2009, then Governor Rick Perry made national headlines for jokingly suggesting that Texas might secede. In June 2022, the Texas State Republican Convention adopted a platform urging the legislature to put a referendum before the people of Texas in November 2023, quote, to determine whether or not the state of Texas should reassert its status as an independent nation, unquote. And in 2023, former state rep Brian Slayton filed a resolution seeking an election to allow Texas voters to decide whether to leave the United States. However, the law is clear that Texas may not leave the Union. Although most conservatives in the state who might be angry over some kind of policy coming from the federal government, and the calls seem to become more frequent when a Democrat is occupying the White House. State Rep Kyle Fitterman, Republican from Fredericksburg, filed a bill in 2021 to create a referendum election on whether Texas should create a joint legislative committee to develop a plan for achieving Texas independence. And he said it is now time that the people of Texas are allowed the right to decide their own future. In the late Supreme Court, Justice Antonio Secola set it to rest when he was asked by a screenwriter in 2006 whether there was a legal basis for secession. His response, he wrote, quote, the answer is clear. If there was any constitutional issue resolved by the Civil War, it is that there is no right to secede. Hence the Pledge of Allegiance that most schools still insist that their students say. This story was originally published in 2016 and was updated in 21-22. You should know. So why does Texas want to secede? Well, they want to because of what's happening at the border. And this year, the calls for Texas to defend itself and to defy the federal government fight over states' rights. So what does that include exactly? It was the standoff at Eagle Pass that precipitated and urged people to have Texas secede from the Union. October polling from the Public Religion Research Institute found that nearly 1 in 4 Americans agreed that patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. Roughly 1/3 of Republicans and white evangelical Protestants agree with that sentiment, compared to 13% of independents and 7% of Democrats. Thus, the word invasion has now come up. And at the cornerstone of the Eagle Pass dispute is the word invasion. Abbott and others have claimed that the state faces an invasion of immigrants that have been aided and abetted by the Biden administration. They argue that Texas has the right to supersede the federal government's constitutionally outlined immigration powers in order to defend itself. The word invasion means to ignore federal law, and federal judges have shot down the argument in Texas about invasion. Adriel Orozco, senior policy counsel at the American Immigration in Washington, D.C., said that Abbott is not the first politician to describe the number of migrants arriving at the border as an invasion. He added that Abbott is blurring the line between political rhetoric and factual legal basis. Unfortunately, the word invasion has been used historically against migrants to justify stricter immigration laws. It appears that Governor Abbott is more taken by the word borders invasions, and that the immigrants who are invading our state, our country, as rapists and murderers. By late 2021, the militia members began patrolling in Kena County, citing invasion that they believe was part of a conspiracy to turn Texas blue. And it was reinforced when Lucas Denny, a North Texas militia leader and Proud Boys collaborator, was later sentenced for his role in the January 6 riots. He was arrested at his property owned by the family of Smith. Finally, in November 2022, Abbott finally invoked the invasion clause, saying in a letter to Biden that Texas had no choice but to protect itself. In fact, U.S. Rep. Chip Roy suggested, tell the Supreme Court to go to hell. If the Supreme Court wants to ignore the truth, Texas still has the duty to defend their people, Roy said. It's like if someone's breaking into your house and the court says, oh, sorry, you can't defend yourself. What do you tell the court? You tell the court to go to hell. You defend yourself and then figure it out later. Of course, Abbott also argued that the federal government has broken the compact between the United States and its states. language that has re-echoed since Texas 1861 when they declared secession over slavery. A Fox News host, Maria Bartiromo, asked Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick over the weekend, "You've got Texas rights versus federal rights, both sides with guns." And Patrick responded by saying, "We believe constitutionally we are right. We have a right to defend our citizens. We have a right to defend this country." And so it goes on. What are the 10 things we will lose as a country should Texas actually secede from the Union? Number one, Texas has the worst health care in that state. It's number one. Overall health care is at 31.61. Texas had the highest rate of uninsured people at 22.5%. It also had the highest rate of uninsured children, unemployed, and elderly people. Something to think about. Numerous clinics providing abortions have been closed. That's number 2 on the list. No abortions. Planned Parenthood Danielle Wells said, "Today's ruling will have tragic consequences for women in Texas and across the state." In the wake of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, it means that 1 in 3 Texas women will no longer have access to safe abortion services. Several states, including Oklahoma and Kansas, are also the home to some of the strictest laws on abortion. 3, discriminatory religious standards. The Texas Bill of Rights mandates that anyone who wants to qualify for a public office must first acknowledge the existence of a supreme being. According to the Texas Constitution, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust in the state, nor shall anyone be excluded from holding office on account of his religious sentiments, provided he acknowledges the existence of a supreme being. Perry said, "I'm proud we are standing up for religious freedom in our state. Freedom of religion doesn't mean freedom from religion." Number 4, Texas is one of the worst states for women. 2013 report by the Center for American Progress gave the state of Texas an F for how it treats women. The report revealed that women in Texas make 79 cents for every dollar men make, while more than 19% of women in Texas live in poverty. Moreover, almost 25% of non-elderly women in Texas are uninsured. Texas also fails to provide paid family, medical, or temporary disability leave. This leaves women, and some men, without the security of knowing their job will be there if they need to take time off to care for the family or medical issues. 5, frequent executions, including of mentally ill and challenged citizens. Texas leads the number of executions with 503 since 1976, including 14 thus far in 2013. A September report on the fairness and accuracy of Texas death penalty system published by the American Bar Association found In many areas, Texas appears out of state with better practices implemented in other capital jurisdictions. It fails to rely upon scientifically reliable methods and processes in the administration of the death penalty and provides the public with inadequate information to understand and evaluate capital punishment in the state. The state legislature, however, argues that it allows people with mental retardation to be sentenced to death. The state's definition of mental retardation are not supported by any medical authority and instead rely on popular misconceptions regarding how persons with mental retardation behave. The report reads, the law also targets student, low-income, and minority voters who are less likely to possess the required form of identification. 8. Chuck Norris, the martial artist, would be sorely missed for his brilliant systematic achievements and is true to Texas conservative Christian values. 9. The Texas belt buckles. How else are they going to keep their pants up? And last, Ted Cruz. And he's the most divisive member of the modern day GOP. Next week, we will have an individual from an audience that we have, PWTR Network, and she will come on and remind everyone living in the United States about how it affects the people of Texas. Some of the things that perhaps our politicians, in their haste to defend our rights, forget how much the federal government is part of the state and how it affects their rights and their benefits and their services. Thank you very much for listening to today, Lest We Forget Hysterical with Lillian Cauldwell. You can find the podcast on youtube.com/PWR Network _ PW Talk Radio, at passionateworldtalkradio.com, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all on the directories that are devoted to podcasts. If you would like to become and participate as a member of the audience to talk about secession, text me at 484-364-1032, your name, your email, and a number or email where we can reach you, and arrangements will be made. Thank you once again for listening, and remember, please keep listening. Thank you.